us today. We'll be going ahead and we will start within the next 2 to 3 minutes, but welcome to the conversation and the session on the African Care Economy Index. We're really happy to have you on board. Please go ahead and feel free to use the chat to tell us where you're joining us from, whether you're joining us from the northern part of Africa, the southern part of Africa, Eastern Africa, Western Africa, Central. We're really excited to be able to have this space today with all of you. Please go ahead and let us know where you're joining us from as we kickstart today's session. Great, I can see that chat is getting busy. Thank you. We see you all the way from South Sudan. We can see Istanbul is in the room. Senegal is in the room. We can see Kenya in the room. Keep them coming. We'd love to know where you're joining us from before we start today's session. Great. Welcome, Mumbe from Cameroon. Wessel from South Africa. Welcome. Sandra, all the way from Kakamega. Welcome. Happy to have you here. Salima from Johannesburg. Lungile from South Africa. Great. Thank you, everyone. So once again, welcome to our session on the African Care Economy Index. Before we start off, I'll just give you a few of the platform functions. Please note we do have simultaneous interpretation available for you. We have English interpretation, French interpretation, as well as Portuguese interpretation. Kindly have a look at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a round shape which resembles a globe written interpretation. Go ahead and click on it and choose either of the language options which are available for you. We do have English, French, and Portuguese. As well, we will have a discussion session where you'll be able to share some of your insights and interventions later on in the conversation, and you will be able to do this using the Q&A button to submit questions and comments. Please feel free within the time of the whole conversation, the presentations, the discussions, to be able to go ahead and use the Q&A submission button. The Q&A button is also at the bottom of your screen, just that which is written Q&A next to the chat box. You'll be able to use that for any questions, comments, feedback, which we are very much welcoming. Imali? Thank you for that beautiful video, Imali. And we'll now go ahead and start the session for today afternoon, evening, or morning, dependent on where you're joining us from. Now, COVID-19 has laid bare the negative consequences of long-standing gender gaps and norms around caregiving and has brought in light, in an unprecedented way, the critical role of care, which is predominantly performed by women, both as frontline healthcare workers and informal care providers in their families. Women continue to be marginalized and bear the heavier burden of increased unpaid care work, rise in gender-based violence, poor service delivery, and healthcare with little to no social protection mechanisms in place. It is within this background that FemNet, in partnership with the UNDP, with the support of the Government of Canada, in the wake of COVID-19, commissioned and conducted a quantitative and qualitative research on the care economy in the context of Africa. This high-level convening or meeting, however you'd like to call this space where we get to have all of you, is to be able to share the research and the findings of the care economy in Africa, present the proposed Africa Care Economy Index, but most importantly, we are creating this platform to be able to reflect, to be able to engage, and we want to take stock of the care economy system in Africa. So we're really looking forward to be able to hear from you based on wherever you're coming from. What are some of the things which you've been able to observe in relation to unpaid care work? What are some of the proposed recommendations you may have? But most importantly, what can we do to be able to advance the care economy in Africa? So without further ado, I am your moderator, Nicole Maloba, and I will now call on Memory Kachambwa, Executive Director for the African Women and Development and Communication Network, to be able to share with us some welcoming remarks.
Thank you so much, Nicole. It's so lovely to have you in the FemNet space. I know now that you're with Christian Aid, but good afternoon, good morning, everyone from wherever you're connecting from. I'm so delighted today to welcome you to this presentation of the Africa Care Economy Index. As already alluded to by Nicole, we came together, UNDP, with support from the Government of Canada in the wake of COVID to do a research, much more deeper research, which was done by Salima, who will be presenting the Africa Care Economy Index, but to really get more information, more in-depth look at the different countries, but to also put out information out there in terms of what does care look like if governments are to take it on board as an economy on the African continent. We know that we have received a lot of backlash in terms of what is care, what constitutes care, and what a care economy could look like. I'm getting some echo. Okay, thank you. Like I was saying, we have received a lot of backlash that a care economy on the African continent is not possible, but we know that the majority of women and girls are the ones who bear care work, domestic work, and it is unpaid, it is not recognized, it is not remunerated. So by putting out this piece of evidence, putting out this data that will be presented today, we really hope that we'll start shifting the narrative and demonstrating that a care economy is the only way to go if we are going to grow our economies. So I am so excited, and I really want to thank everyone who has come to this meeting today, that we are able to really, it's been a long journey, but we are also able to demonstrate that if care is put at the center, economies will grow, but not only will they grow considerably, but that they will provide equality, they will provide equity, and they will provide the solution to most of the economic problems that we are facing as a continent. So I do hope that we will be very live in terms of listening into the research, but also providing propositions. I think today we are actually presenting what we are proposing, and we are also inviting you to partner with us as we proceed with the whole campaign on making sure that the care economy is recognized, is counted, but it's also contributing to the work and the labor that women, we know the majority of women and girls who are in the informal sector, but also in the domestic sector, are contributing to. So thank you so much. I'll go back to Nicole, and I really hope we'll have a very insightful afternoon today. Thank you.
Thank you for that memory. Indeed, this is the time, and I think this is definitely the place to start. It's time for a bold rethink of the care economy in Africa. We'll now move on to Raquel Lagunas, the Global Director for Gender for UNDP. Raquel, are you with us? Welcome, Raquel.
Sorry, Nicole.
Raquel does not have.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Raquel.
No echo?
Just go ahead and speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, no echo.
Okay. Let me open the camera. Hello to all of you. Good morning, good afternoon. I wanted to. Can you hear me? Yes?
Não sei se pode me ouvir.
We can hear someone with the...
We can hear the French or Portuguese interpretation.
Portuguese.
Portuguese interpretation on the line.
Yes.
Yes, should I start?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Nicole. I was saying that on
Bom dia, Nicole.
We can still, sorry, just a minute, Raquel.
Yeah.
Femnet, if you could look into moving the Portuguese interpretation off to its specific channel so that we don't hear it on the main page. Raquel, can we try now?
Yes, let's try now. So I was saying that on behalf of UNDP, I am very, very happy to be here with all of you today for this strategic and very important conversation and meeting about the presentation of the care economy research findings and the proposed Africa Care Economy Index. Let me take this opportunity, first of all, to congratulate Femnet colleagues and our UNDP Regional Service Center team, gender team, for this successfully regional research and for coming up with this very important index that is going to have a big impact, not only in Africa. My guess is that also across other regions. So most importantly, the fact that this has been and is right now opening and creating this space, this inclusive space for other stakeholders in the region to engage, to contribute, to input into this proposed index. That is how good things happen, right? Through processes that are open and are co-creative processes. So allow me to give a very special thanks to the Government of Canada for their consistent and continued technical and financial support and very deep commitment to gender equality, to the advancement of gender equality and the empowerment of women in Africa. So ending poverty, I think we all know and have been discussing many times before, requires a major shift in economic thinking. I would say even a radical reconfiguration of the economic power relations. So we need to be very ambitious to eliminate these structural barriers in the economies that are keeping women behind. So the uneven distribution of unpaid care and time poverty, the impact that is time poverty, is one of them, is one of the structural barriers. So globally, and you know also the data, but it's worthy to repeat, that globally women perform as much as 3 times more or unpaid care work than men. So the monetary equivalent is 10.8 trillion per year. The pandemic has made very visible, as my colleague said before, the unfair distribution of unpaid care, but also the links between care work with human infrastructure, with economic growth, and with development. So this has been underscored. So it is urgent that we fortify the care economy globally and we make it visible. Only what we can measure many times is visible. So we are here for a very meaningful task or duty. So in UNDP, when the coronavirus, the crisis started, with UN Women, we created the global COVID global tracker, response tracker, to monitor governmental responses to the crisis, but also to screen the gender dimension of these responses. So, and it's very interesting, the data worldwide, only 11% of the social protection and labor market measures adopted by governments supported unpaid care work, only 11%. So more specifically, we go to the situation of South Africa, not South Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, where out of 221 gender-sensitive measures, only 10, this is 4.5%, addressed unpaid care work. So there is a big gap, there is a big problem here. The status of the situation is partly because of this misconception that care work cannot be measured. It's too difficult. But we're going to prove that it's possible, right? So once we are able to track unpaid care work, we will be able to offer to the policymakers evidence-based data and analysis to make a proper a stronger policy decisions, right? To deliver public policies for all, for everybody, policies that work also for women. So this is what the SDGs agenda is proposing. The SDGs agenda, as you also know, includes one of the targets is on care work. So, and it's recognize and value unpaid care and domestic work through the provision of public policies. So measuring care is something that is becoming central to achieve the SDGs. Our work, in this case, UNDP on care is consistent with our strategic plan, with the new gender equality strategy that hopefully will be approved in June, and we hope to share with all of you. So we are very excited with this collaboration, with our partnerships with Femnet. UNDP in this next gender strategy is recognizing how relevant is the role of civil society, the role that they play in the international, regional, and national development. So definitely, we are very proud of the work that we are going to present together today. And through UNDP regional projects on advancing gender equality and the empowerment of women, definitely we are creating this space for engagement at the regional level, but as I said, it will impact on the global level. So to conclude, let me emphasize how strong is UNDP's commitment to continue strengthening this partnership, but also assuring that the findings are not just staying at the research level. We will do all our efforts to connect this to the policy level, to advocate and to lobby, so we can create the scenario for a new social contract. So I will close here, and I wish you all very fruitful deliberations. And thank you so much for inviting me to this event. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Raquel. I think it's very important to always reiterate the importance of course, gender desegregated data to be able to help, advise these governments to actually be able to recognize, reduce, and redistribute care work. And this is just the beginning. They always say they don't have data. They always say they don't have research, but here we are. We have it for them. And this will also give us an opportunity to use this as an advocacy toolkit for accountability with the policymakers. Thank you so much for that once again. We'll now move on to Mrs. Tsitsi Fungurani, Senior Development Officer for the High Commission of Canada to South Africa. Tsitsi, over to you.
Thank you very much, Director of Program. It is my greatest pleasure to offer remarks on behalf of Canada at this launch of the Care Economy Index. So Canada, through our Feminist International Assistance Policy, is explicitly committed to help to address unpaid care work and the disproportionate burden of care shouldered by women and girls around the world. Care work is essential for human well-being and sustainable economic growth, but across the world, care work continues to be overlooked, undervalued, and highly gendered. The disproportionate responsibility of unpaid care carried by women and girls restricts their opportunities for education, employment, political and social engagement, and leisure, and deepens their vulnerability to poverty. Women are also disproportionately represented in the informal paid care work, which is characterized by low pay, low status, and poor working conditions. The COVID-19 pandemic is also accelerating the demand for care work, deepening already existing inequalities and then entrenching established gender norms. It is having disproportionate socioeconomic impact on women and girls, and further increasing care responsibilities, reducing women's earning potential, increasing the incidence of gender-based violence, and limiting women and girls' agency. To address these inequalities, Canada has committed to scaling its support for projects that can directly or indirectly address inequalities related to care work. This is anchored by the government's commitment to gender equality and human rights, and underpinned by the concept that care is not a women's burden, but a social good, and that solutions for the transformation of care are the responsibility first and foremost of the state, but also of civil society, markets, and communities. As a significant element of Canada's work in sub-Saharan Africa on promoting women's economic empowerment, we are happy to be supporting the UNDP and the regional project on advancing gender equality and women empowerment in Africa. Through this initiative, Canada is working with the regional economic communities and their member states, as well as regional networks of women CSOs, such as Femnet and others that are in this webinar today, to engage in initiatives that increase the RECs and CSOs' capabilities to support their member states towards women's economic empowerment. The Care Economy Index that the project is launching today is a key advocacy tool towards this goal. We want to congratulate UNDP and Femnet for this great work. The importance of evidence-based advocacy cannot be overemphasized. It is a critical component towards the fulfillment of gender equality and women empowerment commitments in the realization of Agenda 2063 and the SDGs. Therefore, as the former speaker has said, let us not let the Care Economy Index gather dust. Let us all use it to amplify voices in influencing policy and practice in addressing the unequal distribution of care through what we call the 5 Rs, which the first one is recognizing the value of unpaid and poorly paid care work, which is done primarily by women and girls, reducing the hours spent on unpaid care work through time-saving technology and care supporting infrastructure, and redistributing responsibility for care work more equitably between women and men and boys and girls, and shifting responsibilities for unpaid care work to the state or to the employers. Ensuring women and caregivers are represented and have a voice in decision-making and design of care-related policies and programs that affect their lives. And finally, responding to the rights and needs of all care workers through gender-responsive social protection and labor laws that promote safe and equitable working conditions. So I really want to wish you all successful deliberations at this launch of the Care Economy Index. It is really great work, and we look forward to taking this work forward, supporting UNDP, Femnet, and other organizations that are advancing this work. I thank you all.
Thank you so much for that, Tsitsi. It's great to see the support that we do get from the government of Canada when it comes to pushing the action of the care economy and just trying to be able to advance that, especially within the region. I believe it was Ms. Karina Good from the government of Canada, and she always used to say, if I quote her words rightly, that care is a triple win: a win for the economy, a win for gender equality, and a win for the women. And so it's very important, and we're very happy that we're able to have the support to be able to advance this from the global north, trickling down all the way to the global south. We'll now move on to our next speaker, who is Ms. Jean Dekuna, who is the UN Women Senior Global Advisor for Migration and Women's Economic Empowerment. Jean will be giving us an overview of the care economy in Africa. Before we take a deep delve into what the Care Economy Index could look like, what does the care economy look like in Africa? Where do we start from? Where are we heading to? So Jean, over to you.
Thank you. Sorry,
we lost you a bit. Can you?
Yeah, I can't start my video, so I'll just start. If the hosts can help me, that would be great.
All right. Femnet, if you could look in. Yes, we see you now. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And a huge shout out to those who've been engaged in this research and developing the Care Economy Index. UN Women, and on behalf of UN Women, I'm very pleased wish to thank the organizers for inviting us to present this overview on the care economy in Africa. Now, many of you know that UN Women across the globe has been quite invested on work in the care economy pre-COVID, but also during the pandemic, particularly in the areas of research, data collection, analytics, as well as time use surveys. And the UN Women Global Flagship, Progress of the World's Women, 2019-2020, that focused on families in changing societies. The UN Women Regional Office for the Arab States publication on the care economy in the Arab region and the promotion of gender equality in 2020, the UN Women paper that was commissioned by the Abu Dhabi Dialogue Secretariat for the ministerial meeting in October 2021 on the future of work for women migrant workers in the Asia Gulf States corridor, but particularly focusing on migrant care workers, domestic workers, and healthcare workers. And of course, the UN Women UNDP Global Tracker, Gender Tracker for COVID-19 are examples of this. And as you know, we use this evidence in our capacity building for advocacy with respect to policy reform, upstream technical advice, technical assistance. But we've also worked on social norm change initiatives, interrogating masculinities and femininities through research, data collection, and using this information to build on and develop our campaigns. For instance, the Engage Fatherhood campaign, the advocacy and the campaign on paternity leave in the Arab states are a few examples. And so my interventions will essentially focus on this work, but also on my portfolio of work, which deals with migrant women workers, including migrant care workers. I wish to make and I wish to reinforce the following points in relation to the care economy in Africa. One, perspectival frameworks on the significance of care work. Two, current and emerging trends on the care economy and broad directions of engagement. And three, concrete recommendations for action and principles framing these actions. So to begin with, in terms of perspectival frameworks, the totality of women's work really includes paid and unpaid work, including care work in families and households, paid and unpaid work, including care work in public work sites beyond households, and thirdly, paid and unpaid work, including care work in communities. Two, care work is a public good fundamental to societies and economies, as it sustains and it renews people, it builds human capabilities, it renews the working population that really creates value for the economy and keeps the wheels of society changing. And its benefit then extends well beyond, as you can see, well beyond just the direct recipients of care. But despite being a public good, the responsibility for care provisioning largely rests with families. And has been said earlier, there is a need to shift this to the state provision of care policies and care infrastructures. And there are different models for delivery. It could be public provisioning or private public sector provisioning or non-profit provisioning and so on. Well, within and beyond families, as has also been said, care provisioning largely or sometimes solely rests with women and girls, constituting the most fundamental aspect in the gender-based division of labor that constructs women's unpaid care work as intrinsic to women's natures, as a labor of love, emanating naturally from the depths of one's beings and requiring no particular skills. And as this is unpaid and not accounted for in GDPs, this is not considered work. And this lowers the value and the conditions of paid work at all levels, but particularly for women who are located at the lower ends of care chains. Now, why women's unpaid care work is invisibilized in Africa and elsewhere, and as has been said, women spend more time than men on unpaid care work and more time on paid and unpaid care work together, about 3.4 times more on unpaid care work. We really need to recognize the hidden value of this work, both in terms of its social and economic functions in the region, because this is critical then to place care work higher on the policy agenda. So adopting a whole of government, a whole of society approach, our interventions need to recognize, reduce, redistribute unpaid care work, and to professionalize and to enhance paid care work for paid care workers and ensure the representation of these workers on decision-making mechanisms to design policies, to implement, to monitor and evaluate policies and programs in line with their strategic interests. What are some of the current and emerging trends and the broad direction of engagement? Well, what is very clear is a gap between available care infrastructure and other types of physical infrastructure, particularly long-term care. So, and this all involves policies, programs, institutions, quality of care, coverage related to maternity, paternity, parental leave, early childhood care, and education, elder care, disability care, care for HIV, people living with HIV and AIDS on one hand, and the demand for it on the other hand by care providers who are largely women and most in need of care, such as women and those who are most in need of care. And those who are most in need of care also involve women who shoulder care responsibilities, older persons, persons living with disabilities, those living with HIV and AIDS, indigenous people, those living in rural areas, those working in non-standard forms of employment or in informal and vulnerable jobs. And I want to recall, I want to place before you a few startling figures, for instance. The current profile of unpaid care providers in Africa is that of a female between 15 to 54 years of age with few economic resources, several children, a low level of education and skills, and often with health problems or disabilities, who simultaneously works for pay or profits, mostly in the informal economy, and receives little or no formal care support. A large number of these women are single mothers with several children. Some of these girls would drop out of education to provide care provisioning or to provide care for families. And a large number of them are actively involved in the labor force with serious decent work deficits. In sub-Saharan Africa, 68% of community workers, health workers, are mostly young women. 59% had only up to primary education, and the vast majority of them are unpaid. 43% receive non-monetary incentives and 23% receive stipends. Moreover, they incur costs on transportation, which are frequently not covered. As was said earlier, in Africa, women spend about 3.4 times more, or spend 3.4 times more time on unpaid care work than men, and more hours than men when unpaid care work and paid care work are added together. And the women-men ratio of total work, paid and unpaid, stands at 1.19 in the region. And therefore, this provides us with a huge opportunity to invest in the care economy in terms of creating new jobs for care workers, in terms of providing quality care services with good coverage, redistributing care work. Jobs, as we know, for care workers, for all women, have a multiplier effect on families and communities and contribute to increasing economic growth and GDPs. We do need to figure how much needs to be invested in the care economy, how many decent jobs will be created, what contribution in terms of figures this makes to the GDP, who will be served, what will the service be like, how many will be served. Now, such an investment would allow countries to actually reach several targets, SDG targets, by 2030, perhaps. SDG 3, that is health for all, SDG 4, education for all, SDG 5, gender equality, SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. The second trend that I want to point to is migration. Now, although intra-regional migration still dominates Africa, an emerging trend is the increasing migration of women across continents. So to the Gulf states to replace Asian workers, or to North Africa and beyond via various Mediterranean routes to Europe. And most of these women, unfortunately, work at the lower ends of the care sector as domestic workers or at mid and lower levels in the hospitality sector. We therefore need to invest in their professionalization and training, in skills mobility partnerships via bilateral agreements, mutual recognition agreements with countries of destination to ensure decent work for these women. Moreover, their children and families left behind would likely have a whole range of care needs, and these need to be addressed. So what is the recommended action that we propose and what are the principles governing this action? Number one, invest in national time use surveys and other data collection on the care economy, such as assessment of care policies, their actual coverage and uptake, the impacts on recipients, conditions of care workers, including domestic workers. I'm talking about paid care workers now. All of this contributes to recognizing care work, its extent, its contribution by women, trends in the care economy, and further areas of work that we need to act on or engage on. And so the Care Economy Index really needs to be applauded because it is an effort in this direction. Secondly, we need to utilize this evidence to design and implement inclusive policies and programs, which include aligning maternity leave policies with ILO standards and financing this perhaps through social insurance instead of employer liability approaches, so that you render them accessible to women in the informal sector, to women who are self-employed. But as importantly, we really need to focus on and advocate for paternity leave policies or parental leave and encourage the take-up of paternity leave and parental leave through, and this is at work sites now and socially as well, through equal recognition to paid work and unpaid care work for men and women at the workplace. We need to also do this through social norm change initiatives and consciousness raising, and these need to be backed by incentives at the workplace. We need to ensure universal free early childhood care and education to enhance enrollment and to ensure that it actually benefits the poor. We need elderly and disability care and so on. It is extremely important that we address the professionalization and job quality of care workers across all care sectors, but particularly the most vulnerable care sectors like social care and early childhood care and education that have the most vulnerable employment, which is measured by their levels of informality and the education levels of workers. Professionalizing and regulation of these sectors is important to ensure service and job quality. It is critical for the safety and well-being of care recipients and care workers. It increases uptake and it changes our perceptions in, especially when we devalue these forms of paid care work. We need to invest in domestic and public infrastructure, such as time and labor-saving devices. We need to invest in public goods, public infrastructure, physical infrastructure, like clean water, sanitation, energy, clean energy, to reduce women's care work, but also we need to generate employment for women on physical infrastructure projects, enterprises, and services. We need to invest, as I said earlier, in professionalization and skills mobility partnerships, decent work agendas for migrant women workers, particularly migrant care workers. But I do want to say that the real crux is in changing gendered social norms, and therefore we need to work on social norm change initiatives, promoting shared work between men and women in families.
Jane, I'm just flagging Jane.
Yes,
just flagging.
Give me 1 minute more.
All right.
And this is a very fundamental aspect of gender equality. And this needs to go hand in hand with also drawing on the facilities which exist through public-private provision of care infrastructures. These interventions must be underlined by a whole of government, whole of society approach with care workers strongly represented in decision-making, non-discrimination and equality for those who provide care and receive care especially enhancing the equality of access to underserved women, to underserved communities, to underserved geographies. And finally, I wish to say that our interventions must ensure that action does not unintentionally dissuade employers from hiring women. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Zain. I think that's just so much to take in, so much to absorb. The figures, the numbers, this just shows that we need, like a 360 degrees, turn on just looking at the care economy in Africa. This just needs, a holistic and coherent action to be able to look at the 5 R's and how we can be able to move forward. I think a lot of people talk about, of course, investing national income towards the care economy, and the figures 10%, but is 10% enough for what we contribute to the GDP? I think those are some of the conversations we'll have when we move to the discussion section of today's conversation. Just before I bring on Salima with the Care Economy Index, for those of you who are joining us, I just wanted to quickly flag that we do have simultaneous interpretation. Please go ahead and look at the sign, which is circular and resembles a globe at the bottom of your screen. We do have English, French, and Portuguese interpretation, so feel free to use any option which is suitable for you. We are also taking questions based on what has come thus far in the conversation from all our interventions and speakers. Please feel free to comment. Let us know what you're thinking. What are your thoughts through the Q&A chat box, which is also at the bottom of your screen. Just go ahead and use that. We would like to hear from you. But now we move on to what has also brought us here. What does a Care Economy Index for Africa look like? We speak about the 5 R's. Most conversation has gone around. We need to recognize first, based on norms and cultural values. Do we even recognize, or do policymakers recognize care in Africa, or do they think that that is something which is and should be? But we're here today to be able to share some of those research, and we're really excited to have Salima on board. So Dr. Salima Valiani is an independent researcher and author of the Africa Care Economy Index. She has also published the research monograph, Rethinking an Equal Exchange, the Global Integration of Nursing Labor Markets, and numerous articles on the political economy of healthcare, migration, and development. In 2012, she was awarded the Feminist Economics Rhonda Williams Prize in recognition of her work in advocacy and research. So without further ado, welcome Salima, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicole. Thanks to Femnet, the UNDP, and all of you who have joined us today. I'm very excited, along with Femnet, to present the index, as we've been saying. When I approached Femnet about the idea of an index, it was into the second wave of COVID, and it occurred to me that we need to evaluate countries. And as you will see, this is a methodological proposition for not only Africa, but all world regions. We begin with Africa, which is where most of us are. Let me begin the slideshow. Here we have the cover of the study, which you will get your hands on, I hope, very soon after the launch. Oh dear. As we have been hearing, the coronavirus pandemic has reignited interest in care. As early as 2020, the United Nations Economic Commission on Latin America emphasized that COVID-19 has brought to light in an unprecedented way the importance of care for the sustainability of life. This is beyond the pandemic. before and after. The United Nations Economic Commission on Africa also early on pointed out increased unpaid care demands due to school closures and caring for the ill likely mean that women will forego economic activities, and this will feed into financial inequality. So the index is based on the following argument. Socialized public sector response is crucial to reverse the normalized unequal distribution of care work in the African continent. This will improve the well-being of women and girls as called for in the African Feminist Charter, which dates way back to 2007. Additionally, a socialized public sector response will materialize Africa's demographic dividend into greater collective wealth. Oh dear, I'm not getting. I'm not able to share screen and okay, there we go. Let's look at some of the figures on the distribution of care work. Housework and family care is what I'm talking about here. We've heard some figures in the earlier presentations. Here we have Egypt, 10 to 29-year-old women and men. There's a 16-fold difference. That means women spend and girls spend 16 times more of their time on housework and family care. For South Africa, we have figures around 2 times more for women than men. For Senegal, the numbers are between 3 and 6 times more time spent by women and girls on unpaid care. Let's talk about the supply of care labor in the continent. I argue that it is under severe pressure. According to the WHO Africa, women in Africa are more likely to die of communicable diseases, maternal and perinatal conditions, as well as nutritional deficiencies. 30% of women globally are anemic, and at least half live in Africa. This is one example. I argue further that the current care economy based on unpaid female labor in Africa is unsustainable. This is a diagram which defines the care economy for the index. We have the demand for care, which is the need for care. We have the supply of care, which is the labor power to provide the care. And at the bottom, you have the cradle of legislation, policy, financing, and regulation, which Dr. Jean as well as Raquel have mentioned, which are a crucial part of the care economy. The index is made up of 10 metrics, totaling 30 points. It bears mentioning a definition of socialized care, which is crucial to the argument of the index. Socialized care means publicly financed and provided, non-profit, financed relative to need, and collectively defined in culturally and socially appropriate forms. This is a strong feminist definition because this index takes a high measure to evaluate African states. Let's go to the first metric, paid maternity and parental leave. This is arguably the most basic form of respecting care work globally. paid maternity and parental leave. In Africa, it is particularly important given that the average birth rate is almost double global rates at 4.7 births per woman. Paid maternity leave is basic, but paid parental leave is ideal because paid parental leave allows for the redistribution of this early infant care work within the family. So to both males, females, or both parents, let's say, in a non-gendered way. 53 countries in the continent have legislated maternity leave, but none have parental leave. Additionally, 39 countries exclude large segments of women from this paid maternity leave. Here you see a few of the categories: self-employed women, domestic workers, agricultural workers, casual workers, migrant workers, and artisans. A key research question that I pose in this section of the index: how do we replace female workers during maternity leave, given that in many African countries, large numbers of women work in agriculture? And one place to look is youth, which we know there are high unemployment rates of youth in many African countries. Let's go to the second metric, socialized childcare. The numbers you see in purple are the points per metric. Socialized childcare gets a high number of points, given that we have high numbers of children in the continent. When we look at the dependency ratio for Africa, even accounting for regional differences within the continent, the dependency ratio is high in global standards and will continue to be so until 2050. The paper has the numbers, which you will all study. Given the low income levels of females in Africa, adequately funded socialized childcare is the means to make quality childcare universal and accessible to all families. I want to highlight the Scandinavian countries for their emphasis on active citizenship in the formulation and organization of childcare. So this involves the participation of parents, childcare workers, administrators, and municipal officials in shaping and selecting different forms of care. This is relevant for the construction of socialized childcare in African countries, where various forms of collective care can be shaped according to cultural and social preferences. A legal database and policy search for childcare related laws and policies in African countries shows a lack of socialized childcare in all countries, with the exception of Algeria, where childcare is partially socialized. Let's go to socialized care for elders. So as it has been said already, Africa is noted as the continent with the most unshared system of care in the world. Over 70% of care for the elderly in particular in Africa is provided within the family. The old age dependency ratios are and will continue to be low in Africa compared to the rest of the world, but they are on the rise and will almost double in North and Southern Africa by 2050. So given significantly higher and rising old age dependency ratios in every other major region of the world, Africa risks losing yet more care workers of various types to these other regions. And for that reason, socialized care is important also in this category. Whether for children, elders, or others, socialized care includes various types of care workers, training for various types of care workers, as it's been mentioned, as well as living wages. This will allow us to retain care workers within the African continent and possibly draw back to Africa at least a portion of caring workers that have emigrated. When we look at legislation and policy around public homes and care programs for the elderly, we see that socialized care for elderly is non-existent in the continent. Regulation of privately provided elder care was found for only 3 countries: Algeria, South Africa, and Mauritius. Metric 4. Socialized care for people living with disabilities. The estimates of disability rates in Africa range from 10 to 40% of the population. These are old figures with much of the assessment needed to organize care in the continent. We need detailed research at the country and regional, sub-regional levels. So this is the case with disability. 10 to 40% of the population is quite a large range. The further estimate is that between 10 to 15% of school-age children are affected by disability. In order to organize the care, we need to know what is the demand, what is the proportion of the population in need of such care. Scanning legislation and policy for care for people living with disabilities in the continent, we find that not a single African country has legislation around public programs for the care of people living with disabilities. Let's move to socialized healthcare. Socialized healthcare is a key indicator of social recognition and support for care. Along with traditional medicine, public healthcare is the principal site to which the majority of caregivers in Africa turn when unpaid care is no longer sufficient to tend to the ill. Africa has the world's highest nurse-to-doctor ratio at 5.2 nurses to every doctor, and 65% of nurses in the continent are female. Public healthcare then is an important vehicle for both valuing and redistributing care work. Living wages and adequate training for all healthcare workers is an expression of collective value and respect for care work. For this metric, rather than legislation and policy, national healthcare spending data is used. Government healthcare expenditure as a percentage of total government expenditure is selected. I have based this on the 15% target agreed upon by African Union heads of state in the 2001 Abuja Declaration. The most recent data show that on average, between 2002 and 2019, so that's immediately after Abuja up until the present, not a single African government reached this target. Metric 6, socialized food production. We know well that female labor dominates the provision of local food supply in the form of subsistence agriculture in the continent, small ruminant livestock raising and livestock feeding, fish processing, and others. So women not only cultivate the food, but they process crops into food, an extremely labor-intensive and time-consuming activity. Socializing the production of food, then, is pivotal to strengthening the care economy in Africa. A first step to this is public investment in agriculture. So as with healthcare, I have used for this metric the 10% target of general government expenditure set by African governments themselves between 2000 and 2014. The target was set in the Maputo Declaration of Agriculture and Food Security in 2003, where African states committed to 10% of government expenditure to be put to agriculture. Agriculture between 2000 and 2014, we see the expenditure in agriculture equal to or exceeding 10% only for Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Malawi, Niger, and Zimbabwe. Metric 7 is COVID care. I think Raquel mentioned in the very beginning the excellent data put together by UN Women, tracking the measures taken to deal with COVID-related care and other needs. As Raquel mentioned, unpaid care was the least supported around the world. In Africa, only 6 governments instituted unpaid care supports in 10 different forms. Metric 8 is domestic worker protection. So as with healthcare, this is an important indicator of respect for paid care workers in Africa, the majority of which are female and not represented by unions as elsewhere in the world. A review of legislation and regulations shows that 11 countries in the continent accord domestic workers the same rights as other workers under general labor law. 17 countries have partial rights protection for domestic workers. The remaining 26 countries in the continent do not protect domestic worker rights. Egypt explicitly excludes domestic workers, and in both Egypt and Algeria, large numbers of domestic workers are minors. Metric 9 is care grants and subsidies for care work. In the absence of fully or partially socialized care, grants for caregivers and subsidies for paid care are a form of recognizing care work. A review of legislation and policy around the continent shows 3 grants in 2 countries. And the final metric is family care leave. Around the world, family care leave is typically accorded through labor legislation. Given that in Africa, the vast majority of workers are employed in the so-called informal economy, where labor laws do not apply, this measure is evaluated only on 1.5 points. Nevertheless, family care leave is an important labor market measure, marking the recognition of unpaid care responsibilities for the so-called formal sector workers. Only 10 countries in the continent include family-related care leave in labor legislation. Family leave in South Africa, the country with the highest level of formal sector employment, is particularly narrow, covering only 3 days per year with pay, but only for illness of a child or death of an immediate family members. Let's go to the tallying up. I have accorded a pass rate of 18 out of 30 for the countries included in the index, which is all of them. That means full points in the first 6 metrics. You see them listed there on the slide. These are the basics that we need for general day-to-day functioning. Had African countries reached this pass rate, they would have been well equipped to deal with the current pandemic. And here we have the results. Only 6 countries attain a total of more than 5 points. And you see the numbers there. Most African countries fare moderately well only in metric 1, maternity and parental leave legislation. So the minimum pass is not reached by any country in the continent. And given the range of health and demographic challenges in the continent, it is appalling indeed that African countries ranking in the top 10 of the index do not attain even half of the minimum pass. Here we have some specific numbers. Burkina Faso at the highest, 7.25. So these are the top 4. On the left, we have the middle range, Niger, Togo, Sudan, Guinea-Bissau. And in the right, we have the lowest scores in the continent. Gambia, Nigeria, an appalling figure for such a wealthy country, Sierra Leone, Eritrea. Clearly, we have a lot of work to do in the area of the care economy in Africa. These are our ideas at this point: translating the index, popularizing it across the continent, fiery discussion and debate, in-depth country studies, collective definition of forms of socialized care in various parts of Africa, and beyond Africa, care economy indexes for other continents and world regions. We invite all of you to help us in this work. Thank you very much. Please keep in touch, and I look forward to all of your comments and questions.
Thank you so much for that, Salima. it's very good to give us a sort of, retrospect as to how African countries are faring in relation to care work. And this actually gives us an insight for further discussions, which we're about to get into. So I will just go straight into the interventions we have with our two guests. We have Aisha and Mr. Kofi. Oh, Aisha, I see you. Great. So we'll just start off with Aisha. Hello, friend.
Hi.
Hi. So Aisha Rahamatali is from CARE, and she's one of the co-leads of the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights as one of the civil society organizations. So Aisha, we've had from so many interventions. We've had from Salima in terms of the statistics. We've had from Jean. We've had from Raquel. We've had from really great representation today. And what I wanted to ask you was your thoughts around Salima's presentation. Now, we know that care has been and has always been actually key and one of the top priorities for the feminist agenda. As a co-lead of the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights, we know that one of the key actions within the 4 actions of the Action Coalition, one of the main ones is the care economy. We've seen that by 2026, the Action Coalition would like to see, law and policy reforms and the creation of 80 million decent care jobs to recognize, reduce, and redistribute unpaid care work and reward and represent care workers while guaranteeing their labor rights. How do you see this Africa Care Economy Index feeding onto that? And what are some of the opportunities you see that we could be able to collaborate with this as a tool for advancement forward? Aisha, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And thank you, Salima, for such a rich document. As Nicole mentioned, it's really timely for the Action Coalition on Women's Economic Justice and Rights, in which CARE is a co-lead, as Nicole mentioned, but also Femnet, and other feminist organizations like the Women Working Group on Financing for Development, ITUC, Maki Marua, the Huayuru Commission, and ANYAR. Without repeating, what other speakers have said around the impact of COVID on the care economy and how we should look at it, I think one other element that we should look at is the evidence that climate change is also having an impact on women and girls' care burden, especially on the continent. And so it's really a point that the Action Coalition has prioritized as part of this Global Acceleration Plan, as Nicole mentioned, and really with this idea of putting together, increasing the number of countries that have a comprehensive set of measures, investing in public and private quality care services, and the creation of these 8 million decent jobs. So as an Action Coalition, we recognize the need to look for a holistic structural approach to building the care economy by addressing the 5 R's, as we've heard from since the beginning. So we'll do that through law reforms and implementation of laws and policies, increasing pay for paid care workers, and guaranteeing decent work for care workers. Data and accountability will be really important, and I think Salima's presentation showed us how much more data we need. We will need to look at how to quantify the contribution of care work to the care economy, integrate care work, integrate care and the domestic work in the different infrastructure and national planning frameworks. And finally, financing. As an Action Coalition, we want to look at investing and how governments can invest 3 to 10% of the national income back into equitable quality public care services like childcare and aged care, like Salima also mentioned. In addition, we want to look at increasing public investment in essential social services and universal social protection schemes. So as you can see, it's really in line with what we've heard in the index, and it's really timely for us as leaders, but also as commitment makers, as they think of advancing their commitments. So to respond directly to your question, Nicole, I think that the index, as it refers to socialized and public programs and the need for adequate level of financing, it's exactly what we want to look at. It's the ambition of the Action Coalition when we talk about investing this 3 to 10% of funding in care. And the index is really offering us an initial measuring of social recognition and what kind of government support the 54 African countries have put in place or need to put in place. It really gives us a baseline to draw from as we monitor government spending. Many governments, including the government of Kenya, Somalia, Tanzania, Malawi, have made commitments to the EGR Action Coalition. And the 10 metrics that Salima just presented should be socialized with those leaders and commitment makers to serve as indicators as they also report against their yearly reporting for their commitments. I see here really a space for us as CESOs and other leaders to advocate and propose this to the Action Coalition itself, but also to the Secretariat of the Generation Equality Forum, and also as we work on the accountability framework for this process. The other area where I see the added value of this index is the work of the Global Alliance for Care. So this multi-stakeholder initiative was launched by the government of Mexico and UN Women to address the profound implication of the unequal distribution of care on women and girls and boost their level of participation in national economies. And one of the commitments of the Alliance is to promote regulatory frameworks and legislative reforms that recognize the right of care providers and recipients and that support a comprehensive action and policies in care. So given the multiple governments that are members of the Alliance, and on the continent, we know that Somalia, Mozambique, South Africa, Guinea, and Senegal have already committed to join that, have joined actually the Alliance. Such an index is also an entry point for the Alliance to use the 10 metrics as indicators, and also to hold those governments accountable towards it. And I think also in line with what Salima was saying, it's going to be really a space to generate learnings and measures and measure impact of policy change and implementation of care related programs and policies. The last point that I would like to make that make a lot of sense from the work that we've done as an Action Coalition and specifically as civil society organization is the importance that these metrics had put on a participatory and ongoing process from the bottom up, led by women and with support from states, sorry. So really that piece that it's important that women participate and that the definition is really built into the cultural and social programs and services. So this is something that we've pushed as co-leaders, as I mentioned. We really ensured that voices of women and girls and priorities and on paid care work are represented. And this we did through the care manifesto that the CESO leaders put together that influenced the care, the blueprint of the Action Coalition and recommendation to leaders. So as we promote this index with different stakeholders, I think it's important that we keep calling for women and girls leadership in the economy, societies, politics, and the workplace. So thanks again for putting such a huge and rich document together. And as I conclude, I would like to invite all of you in this call who are interested in joining this Action Coalition to make strong commitments around the care agenda and join us in this work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Aisha. It's great to hear the amazing work the different civil society organizations within the Global South are doing towards advancing the care economy and the 5 Rs. We'll now move on to our next intervention from Mr. Kofi Mack. Mr. Kofi is an economist with the African Development Bank. Kofi, I don't know, are you there? Oh,
yes.
Great. Yes, so my question for you, Kofi, is that, of course, we are not new to indexes, and we do know about, of course, the gender equality index which the African Development Bank has been working on, and we're really looking forward to the next edition of that. But it has been praised for being a one-of-a-kind index, based on its comprehensiveness, based on its purpose. One of the actually indexes which actually showcases gender equality data from 52 out of 54 countries. So following Salima's presentation, and with Gender Equality Index, how do you see these indexes being action-oriented in helping African decision makers to address some of the barriers which are preventing African women from engaging and demanding more from the governments? Welcome, Mr. Kofi.
Merci Nicole. Je vais m'exprimer en français. J'avoue que c'est un plaisir d'avoir été associé à cette importante rencontre. Et j'avoue que c'est avec beaucoup de plaisir que j'ai pris connaissance de ce formidable travail qui a été fait par les différents partenaires, et Salima ainsi que les autres experts. Je pense qu'en définitive, ce rapport est tout à fait le bienvenu en vue d'impacter positivement les politiques publiques, notamment en matière justement d'égalité du genre et la transformation justement pour le bien-être de la population. Il y a probablement quelques éléments que j'aimerais relever qui va davantage permettre au rapport d'être amélioré du point de vue de la qualité. Dans un premier temps, je trouve assez innovant qu'un rapport de ce type commence par une histoire telle que celle de Jeanne et de Sylvia, que j'ai beaucoup appréciée. C'est une démarche très bonne pour impulser le débat. Et à cela s'ajoutent quelques autres remarques que j'aimerais faire ressortir. J'estime que d'emblée, il est important de clarifier un certain nombre de concepts. Beaucoup a été déjà fait dans le rapport, mais tel qu'il faut définir clairement l'économie du soin et s'il y a lieu de le différencier avec l'économie des travaux domestiques, il faut le faire dans le rapport en distinguant l'économie des travaux domestiques et l'économie des soins, ou les deux, l'économie des soins et des travaux domestiques. Parce que quand on va un peu plus en profondeur dans l'index, je pense que c'est le recoupage des deux, l'économie des soins et des travaux domestiques. Et en ce moment, comment faire pour que cela puisse transparaître clairement dans le rapport? Donc, le rapport gagnerait à faire ressortir ces deux concepts. Et aussi, par rapport à l'indice en lui-même, il serait bien de préciser les motivations du choix des indicateurs ou des métriques de 1 à 10. Et qu'est-ce qui motive le choix de chacun de ces indicateurs et leur pondération? Par exemple, pour ce qui concerne le métrique congé de maternité ou parental, qu'est-ce qui motive donc la pondération des 4 points? Qu'est-ce qui justifie ce choix-là? Je pense qu'il serait intéressant de développer davantage, peut-être en annexe, pourquoi ces métriques ont été choisies, et plus précisément sur l'indicateur 7 ou le métrique 7, les soins pour la COVID, sachant que le paludisme, par exemple, est aussi très répandu sur le continent. Pourquoi le paludisme n'a pas été retenu et que c'est le COVID? Je sais que l'indice se fait dans le contexte du COVID. Peut-être qu'il y a lieu de le préciser pour enrichir davantage le rapport. Et aussi la question des sources de données. Cela me paraît très important. Je pense que c'est une préoccupation très importante pour la fiabilité des résultats et les propositions de réforme et de politiques publiques qui en découleront. Il faut faire référence à une base de données légale et ne pas la citer cette base de données légale pourrait mettre en mal le travail abattu. Donc, pour chacun des indicateurs, il y a donc lieu de citer clairement la base de données. Et aussi, en annexe, il y a eu la batterie des scores qui ont été indiqués. Il serait utile de préciser qui détermine les scores. Est-ce que ce sont les experts nationaux ou bien ce sont les experts qui ont produit le rapport qui déterminent les scores par pays? Par exemple, l'indicateur 1, toujours, comment a été fait l'évaluation 0,9 de l'Algérie? Sur quelle base l'estimation pour l'indicateur 1, le 0,9 de l'Algérie, sur quelle base cela a été fait et qui l'a fait, par exemple? Et le Burkina Faso 2,5, parce qu'il y a toute une série de critères à ce niveau. Comment est-ce que cela a été fait pour... il serait bien de le préciser également en annexe. Et aussi, il est souhaitable de bien indiquer que le score global de l'indice pour un pays est la somme, c'est l'addition des scores de chaque indicateur pour ce pays. Cela ne transparaît pas clairement, mais dans la méthodologie de l'indicateur, les scores par indicateur ensuite sont compilés, sont additionnés. Il est important de le dire clairement. Peut-être que c'est dit et que je n'ai pas perçu cela, mais il y a lieu que cela transparaisse. Et aussi, qu'est-ce qui motive le choix du niveau du taux de passage? Les 18 sur 30, pourquoi pas 15 sur 30, 15 qui est la moitié et qu'on va à 18? Qu'est-ce qui motive ce choix de 18 sur 30? Il y a lieu de préciser cela. Pour terminer, j'aimerais juste indiquer qu'en définitive, cet indice va beaucoup aider justement à l'indice d'égalité des gens en Afrique que nous produisons avec la Commission économique pour l'Afrique. Et nous sommes à la 2e édition cette année. Le travail est en cours de réalisation. Certainement que la problématique de l'économie des soins et des travaux domestiques vont être pris en compte puisque l'indice d'égalité des gens a 3 composantes, la dimension sociale, la dimension économique et la dimension participation. Naturellement, par rapport à la dimension économique, avec les enquêtes budgétantes, je pense que l'indice serait la bienvenue pour enrichir justement l'indice que nous produisons. Voilà en quelques mots ce que j'avais souhaité indiquer pour améliorer davantage la qualité de ce formidable rapport qui est bienvenu, qui va orienter les décideurs justement dans les prises de décision par rapport aux politiques qui ont attrait, n'est-ce pas, à la population, notamment défavorisée. Merci, merci encore pour l'invitation et je vous retourne la parole.
Thank you for that great insight, Mr. Kofi. I think these are some of the things which will be taken into consideration as we try and finalize on the Africa Care Economy Index. It's also great to hear that the next edition of the Gender Equality Index will soon be with us, and that this is also something which could feed into and will be used as a reference point for further collaboration to be able to advance our agenda. So we now move on to the discussion stage of our session this afternoon, evening, or morning, depending on where you're joining us from, where we open up the floor for any questions and comments which you may have. Please feel free to use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen, to be able to type in any questions you may have. Should you want to actually ask a question, feel free and raise your hand. We will then give you the option to unmute so that you could be able to ask your questions directly. I can see Tracy Sonny, your hand is up, but before I come to Tracy Sonny, just addressing some of the questions and the comments on the chat box. Thank you so much for all the insights and comments you've been sharing. I can see Yaman from Turkey has said wonderful insights to care economy in Africa. Thank you, dear colleagues, for this highly informative session. Bharati says, many thanks for interesting presentations and data. Please share them, and thank you. Monica Yator goes ahead and says, we need to think about agroecology, sustainable farming to enhance healthcare. Without healthy food among the household, there will be an increase in ill health. I also see your question, Desire, is the care index accessible online? So before I hand over to FemNet or UNDP to let us know whether the care economy index is available online, just to flag that the presentations which have been shared today will be shared with you for reference. So I'm sure FemNet is going to be able to do that to the listserv of everyone who's attended today's session and share those PowerPoints with you. So I don't know if anyone from FemNet or UNDP would like to answer the question of whether the care economy index is available. And then we'll come back to Tracy, Sonny, and Jean for questions. Anyone from FemNet or UNDP?
Yes, hi, Nicole, it's Memory. I can come in.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. So yes, the Care Economy Index is available. I think what we are doing today is the presentation where we are also inviting, so for example, what we heard from Africa Development Bank, from the Care, also from Aisha. So we will be posting it on our websites, on the respective websites for FemNet, for UNDP, as well as for the Government of Canada. I'll just ask my colleagues to put in the links. But yes, for everyone who's registered on the call, we will be definitely sharing the index.
Great. Thank you for that, Memory. Tracy, Sonny, would you like to come in and ask your question, and then we'll move to Jean? Tracy? Tracy, are you with us? As we wait for Tracy to come in, we'll just move to Jean.
Thank you, Nicole. I wanted to just know how cast in iron the index is. I was very happy to see domestic workers included. And given the the high levels of movement within country, but also intra-regional and now cross-regional into the Arab states and wider than that, I was wondering what the potential is to actually include migrant domestic workers, and indicators for that to assess government's work on the issue.
Thanks for that, Jean. Salima, if you'd like to come in.
Thank you for the questions and comments.
I have to keep my
Immediately for Dr. Jean's question, I have tried to include migrants as much as possible, for example, in the maternity leave legislation evaluation. I have accorded points to countries that include either migrants inside their countries or immigrants from their countries in the rights around maternity legislation. In terms of domestic workers, it's something to consider, although I think it will be difficult to get the full data set we would need to actually accord points. A quick response to Monsieur Kofi. Merci pour vos commentaires. I just want to say briefly that the appendix of the index includes much of what you are speaking of: criteria, points, why countries received the points they did. And I take your point about the final scores, that maybe we need to be a bit more clear about the addition of those scores. But as you can imagine, a database of 54 countries with 10 metrics is humongous. And I could not include that as an appendix on paper, but we can surely add that online when the monograph is posted. Thanks again.
Thank you for that, Salima. I hope it's able to offer some insight, Kofi. I also see we have a question from Donna. How does one access the report? I know Memory might have addressed that, but if UNDP would like to come in and comment on the index availability, Odette. Have we?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Odette.
Thank you very much. My name is Odette Kabaya, working with UNDP Regional Service Center for Africa. I think just to add on what my colleague Memory said, we will have, of course, to input or to finalize the index and then, of course, post it on our respective website, UNDP One, Femnet, and also the government of Canada, as we said. But for now, I think colleagues were requested to share or just to share the link through the chat box, so that maybe those who want to see it as it is before we have the final version could also access to it. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nicole.
Thank you for that, Odette. So there you go in terms of our availability for the index. Just before we do go to more questions, still taking on some comments from the chat. I do see that we have a comment on, thank you for the fantastic, I think this is Wes. Thank you for a fantastic launch event. We are eager to collaborate from MenCare, Global Fatherhood Campaign, and will certainly cite the index in the next State of the World's Fathers Report 2023 regarding men's engagement in an ethic of care. This is really great. Thank you so much for that. An agenda shared is an agenda advanced, and we're really looking forward to have men on board. Harriet from Uganda asks, many girls are still unable to go back to school, especially those that were victims of teenage pregnancy and sexual violence because of childcare burden. What have other stakeholders or governments done in Africa? And secondly, making childcare accessible for everyone needs new policies and practices. What are other countries doing in this regard? So maybe if Salima, you would be able to address that in terms of what you're able to see in relation to the findings of the research. But before you address that, just one more question. I can see Kofi's hand is up. But before Kofi comes in, just checking if Tracy Soni still wants to ask a question because her hand is still raised. If she's with us, Tracy? Tracy?
Sorry, apologies, Nicole. I think I raised by mistake. Apologies, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. Mr. Kofi, over to you before we go back to Salima.
Oui, merci. Je pense que c'est une question posée par Josia par rapport à l'intégration donc de l'indice au niveau de la comptabilité nationale. C'est toute autre chose au niveau des comptes nationaux pour pouvoir dégager les différents agrégats tels que le produit intérieur brut, les agrégats macroéconomiques. les comptes nationaux se déclinent à partir de ce qu'on appelle les systèmes de comptabilité nationale. Et le système de comptabilité nationale qui définit les normes de comptes nationaux, cela se fait de façon collégiale au niveau de la division statistique du système des Nations Unies. Et présentement, pour la plupart des pays africains, les comptes nationaux s'appuient sur le système de comptabilité nationale 2018. Et tout le débat est à ce niveau. Ce système de comptabilité nationale ne prend pas en compte les travaux domestiques, parce que les travaux domestiques sont considérés comme étant non marchands. Et donc, nous avons les travaux marchands, tout ce qui est monnayé, et il y a des rémunérations, et les travaux non marchands. Et donc, les soins et travaux domestiques que nous avons au niveau des ménages qui ne sont pas rémunérés, ne sont pas pris en compte pour les comptes nationaux, pour le calcul des comptes nationaux. Donc, tout le débat se fait donc au niveau des Nations Unies, où il faut veiller à ce que les travaux domestiques et les soins et travaux domestiques soient intégrés justement au niveau du système de comptabilité nationale. Et dès cet instant, je pense qu'au niveau national, nous pourrons en tenir compte pour les agrégats macroéconomiques. Voilà, merci.
Nicole, you are on mute.
Yeah, I was having a change on muting. Thank you for that, Mr. Kofi. Salima, if you'd like to come on and be able to address some of Harriet's questions. Thank you.
Thank you. For Kofi, again, there is a database of all the legislation that myself and my assistant, Litabo Mailula, put together to, again, create the scoring. So that database is in my possession, and I'm happy to discuss with you its contents. Another point made by Kofi was around the need to make a distinction between household work and caring for persons work. From a feminist perspective, and this is cited in depth in the paper, particularly for Africa, but around the world, such a distinction is not acceptable. You cannot care for people without cleaning the house, without washing the clothes, without going to the market to buy food, which is then prepared to feed the family. So this is why I have not made that distinction, and I stand firm that it is not necessary. We need to look at the whole of the work, and that whole of work must be redistributed, both within the home and broadly in society. In terms also of time use surveys, we do hear the UN Women and other bodies calling for more of this surveying to be done. In the paper, I use a range of evidence, the most recent possible, for various African countries, but much of it is old, and of course, many countries do not have. So we do need more of such studies, but as it is pointed out in the study, countries that have invested in time use surveys have not done much more than that. And when the call came in the Beijing conference for women, it was to do time use surveys in order to bring in policies around the 5 Rs. Why have we not come up with such policies and practices? And this is globally, not only in Africa. So the time use surveys alone are not enough. The question around childcare policies and practices. Thank you. We do have in the study evidence of nonprofit childcare as being superior in terms of caregiver wages and caregiver turnover, child to staff ratios, caregiver education, positive caregiving, and staff development for childcare center employees. All of these come out better in nonprofit childcare institutions. With regard to accessibility, there is some evidence that suggests that where the state both finances and provides childcare, the cost per child is significantly reduced. This makes childcare more accessible. We have the studies of Mathieu for the Canadian province of Quebec, where the per child annual cost of public early childhood care centers is less than 5% of the average worker's annual salary. These are calculations done by myself. This compares with the per child cost of 43% of the average worker's annual salary in Ontario, the neighboring province, where childcare centers are mostly private and public subsidies are minimal. So what this tells us is that adequate public financing and provision makes early childhood care more accessible, but not if it's underfunded. So what we have in Quebec to this day is, while the daily cost is low, we have 50,000 families who cannot access a space in the public centers, and low-income families are underrepresented in these centers. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Salima. It's great to see all the comments coming in, all the questions, but most of all the insights to be able to actually make this care economy index to be concrete. But I guess we can't always cover everything, but this at least allows us to be able to polish on what is already on the table. I do take note, of course, some of the comments coming in. I can see that Sandra asks that we do good presentations, but we also need to consider persons with disabilities. Definitely, this is something that we'll be able to look into if it's not already covered within the Care Economy Index. I also see that Pumi says, congratulations to Femnet, Salima, UNDP on this study. It's an invitation for building the type of countries and continent that we want. Care is a great call. Well done. So thank you so much for the comments and the feedback that is coming in. I do note some of them are still coming in, but unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our session today. So I would just like to move on to the conclusions and way forward, which we will have Odette Kabaya, the Regional Advisor and Gender Team Leader for UNDP, to be able to share on the way forward and next steps. I note that Bibisha had asked, so now what? And so that would be able to highlight. We have this great product. We've had from Mr. Coffee, we've had from Jean, in the work which has been done in relation to advancing care economy and research and data. How can all this come together to be able to allow us to advocate and call for women's economic justice and rights in relation to the care economy? So Odette, over to you. Sandrine? Okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole. That was really, really quite interesting. Distinguished guests, all protocol observed. dear colleagues from UN family, ladies and gentlemen. Mine will be just to say thank you very much to all for having joined this meeting or the presentation of the Care Economy Regional Research Funding and the proposed and timely Africa Care Economy Index. Your active participation and excellent contribution have greatly enriched the discussion and made this meeting a success. I would like to express my gratitude to all our speakers in this webinar, panelists, moderator, you, Nicole, and interpreters for your valuable input, contribution, and professional conduct. This meeting was meant to create a platform to reflect, engage, and take stock of the care system in the region. I'm glad to note that thanks to your active participation and contribution, this objective has been attained, and we are excited with the level of engagement and taking this discussion forward. This meeting today is the first of the planned series of discussions. Working closely with Femnet, and here I'm responding to one of the questions, we will host a series of webinars for further unpack the proposed Care Economy Index dimensions. And I think, as you heard Salima, we have, I think, 10 metrics, and we will have to deep in trying to understand each of the dimensions. So 3 webinars will be held in 2022 this year. The webinars will take a deep dive into the Care Economy Index dimension, as I said, and will bring together all stakeholders here, including women, girls, academia, CSOs from across Africa, our sisters agencies to further discuss and contextualize the issues as we move toward firming up the index. We will communicate further detail of this planned event in the next coming days. I also heard one of the recommendations, especially on supporting and advocating for the work at the country level to collect the data. As we know the Economic Commission for Africa with UNDP have been supporting member states to conduct some work on care economy in countries. And I think this tool, the index, will support civil society organizations and ourselves to further advocate for member states to understand that it is critical to conduct that kind of work. Let me take this opportunity to thank Femnet and, of course, my colleague from UNDP Gender Team for the successful organization of this meeting and the excellent coordination that has ensured this smooth running of the meeting, despite some technical issues we faced at the beginning of the meeting. To Canada, my sister Titi, your technical and financial support continues to be likely a key pillar to our work on advancing gender equality and women's empowerment in the region. I will close this. I will, of course, close my conclude the closing remarks by reaffirming UNDP's commitments. I think you heard my colleague Raquel from the global level. UNDP is really committed to continue the support to advance the gender equality and women's empowerment in Africa, but specifically to continue working with our sisters and brothers from civil society organization. Once again, thank you very much, and I wish you all a good evening. Thank you. Over to you, Nicole.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Odette. I think it goes to say it all, that this is just the beginning of a bigger picture for us. What is it they say in economics? You know, investing in women is smart economics, but investing in girls is even smarter economics, you know, catching them upstream. And these are some of the policies we're trying to put in place, we're trying to ask for, we're trying to demand right now so that our girls can have a better future. So thank you so much for everyone who was able to attend. As you've heard from Odette, this is just the beginning of a bigger picture. So please, they will keep you posted. Femnet and UNDP will keep you posted on the webinars which are upcoming. I'll just ask the speakers to please put their video on for a quick picture. But for our participants and our attendees, thank you once again. Good night, good morning, and good evening from us on this end. Have yourselves a lovely rest of the day. Wandere, you'll take the group picture. Or Meshach?
Nicole, we had requested if everyone can just come in just for those that can, for us to have a quick.
I don't know if Meshach has done that or is
I'm with Meshach right now. Just 2 seconds.
All right.
He's promoting to panelists so that we can take a group picture with everyone's camera on.
So for the participants who are still with us, please, if you do get the notification to be moved to a panelist, please accept, and then please go ahead and put your cameras on so that we can take a group picture. All right. Beryl Ogutu, Alex, Tracy, please go ahead and show us your beautiful, beautiful faces. Therese, Constantine, Ikamokwe, great, awesome. All right, we'll just give it 1 minute and then we'll go ahead and take the group picture. Wambere Meshach, you on it?
Okay, done. We've gotten a few pictures.
You've gotten page 1, okay.
Yeah, page
and
1.
Page 2 as well?
Yeah, both pages.
All right, great.
Thank you.
So thank you once
again
to everyone.
Thanks, Salima, again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, for the excellent facilitation.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, colleagues.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Merci beaucoup.
Si c'est démontable, c'est pas maçon, ça peut être menuisier. Pas de menuisier. Là, on fait la marche. Ah, ok, oui. Il y a le rang auquel on fait que ici, ça ne va pas. Si vous peut-être que vous faites de monter. Et là, vous sentez qu'il y a donc la rampe est trop élevée et que ça fait accélération à la question. Voilà. Je reprends l'image. J'avais déjà expliqué ça, je reprends. Je dis, cette rencontre à 8% à celle qui a dit par lequel elle est honnête, laquelle est honnête. Regarde ici, il faut que la personne va faire sécurité par rapport à ici, où c'est moins élevé que ça parce que le degré d'inclinaison est à 10 cm, alors que ici,